The reward for giving up our sovereignty, we're told, is greater influence in Europe. To see how much influence we have, I've come to the place I grew up. For centuries, fishermen's huts called shields lined the River Tyne. From them came the names of the towns that straddled the mouth of the river, North and South Shields. The seas here are rough, but the water is rich in mackerel, haddock, salmon, herring, cod, skate and shrimp. By the early 20th century, 14,000 tons of fish a year was being landed here at North Shields. There's a daily fish auction here still, in a building part funded by the EU.
Oh yeah, £24 in, 24 you're back in, 24 in, 25, £25. 40 quid for them. 30 pound for them.
In a corner of one of the halls sits fewer than 100 boxes, part filled with fish. A dozen or so fishermen and merchants surround them.
£26, 27, £27 yen, 28, £28, 29, £29, £30, £30.
74-year-old fish merchant John Ellis has been buying at this auction since the 1950s.
Better place, £6 with it.
When I started working down here, there was about 200 firms working on the quay. There was haulage firms on the quay who had 30 and 40 wagons that used to ship the fish away.
And how many boxes would there be in the market then?
In them days, 8, 10, 12, and then you would get also, you get 1,000.
12,000 boxes a day?
Uh-huh.
So of different place?
You couldn't have the next man. You couldn't get moved. Now with this, well, I think the average for the year, it'll just be about 200 boxes a day. So it's quite nothing, isn't it?
When Britain joined the common market, it lost control of its fishing grounds. When quotas were imposed, several other European countries lobbied the EU for Britain's fishing rights to be divided up between them. The British government was powerless to stop this.
The EU has just obliterated the English fishing industry altogether. The quota system they've got now is it's just mad.
Local fishermen were now banned from fishing in waters they'd fished successfully for centuries.
Oh, just beyond the pier over there. In fact, it might be there today, this great big Dutchman, but that Dutchman's got 25% of the whole quota of all of England. It's only 3 or 4 miles off the Tyne, catching herring and mackerel. Local fleet can't catch herring and mackerel, and it's right on the doorstep.
There is still a prospering North Atlantic fishing industry, but only in countries that have retained their independence.
Well, look at the Icelandics and the Faroes and the Norwegians. They sell millions of pounds worth of fish to us. And they're outside the common market. But you tell me a common market country that buys fish off us, but they'll send the fishing boats to the North Sea to catch our fish. And it's just madness.
The EU has been paying British fishermen to destroy their boats.
They said the fishermen, if you want to get out the industry, will give you a lump sum. This here looks like an old boat that's been destroyed. They just watch them with big chainsaws, cutting the old wooden boats up and burning them.
The EU pays fishermen to leave an industry and destroy their boats.
That's right.
While at the same time giving rights to people elsewhere to fish the same waters.
Oh, that's right, uh-huh.
For the fishermen here, being in the EU does not mean that Britain has greater influence over European affairs. It means Europe has taken control of our affairs. We have not gained power, we've lost it.
For the last couple of decades, Britain has voted against 72 measures in the European Council and been defeated 72 times.
How will you be voting in the referendum?
Oh, definitely out. Definitely out. I've known that as soon as I ever got the chance, I'd vote out.
To the Essex coast, an area which voted heavily to leave. Southend-on-Sea is just an hour-and-a-half's drive from London, but politically it feels a world apart.
Well, I voted to leave the European Union the same reason as loads of people from this area in Essex, because they were sick and tired of being ignored. People in this area found their wages have gone down and they've seen massive changes to their communities to no benefit for themselves. and they've got no say over it. And so they voted in their droves to get out of the European Union, to give the political establishment a slap in the face that they think they needed.
I voted to leave the EU. I voted because I'm a fisherman. I've seen my industry smashed to pieces. I would have thought 99% of the fishing industry were voting leave. We lost their control. And my industry has suffered probably more than any other. There is already a shortage of fishermen, let alone fishing boats, and the grounds that we've got to work have got smaller and smaller. The Thames estuary has been affected badly because we're right on the closest part to Europe. We have Dutch, Belgium and French vessels working up to our 6 miles. Many of the people that I know are from all backgrounds. They were all voting out. You know, before it happened, you know, I've got fishermen and acquaintances abroad phoning me up. You are going to vote out, aren't you, Paul? Everybody's going to vote out. Give us a chance. We hate what's going on. And that's from ordinary people.
Working class people who deal with the realities of the world as it is, they don't see themselves as special, they see themselves as part of a community, and a community that's under siege in a lot of ways. They don't feel like they're being represented by anyone anymore. And I think this has given them the confidence to say, we have got a voice and this is how we feel.
Britain's House of Commons began debate today on the formal process of leaving the European Union, and there are few stronger supporters of the move than the UK's fishermen, who say that EU control of what they can catch and where is bad for the trade. Hind Hassan traveled to the south coast of England to find out what the industry is expecting now that Brexit is moving forward.
Andy's been fishing these waters for more than 20 years. In that time, he's seen the number of fishermen like him decrease dramatically. He says the common fisheries policy, the rules and regulations governing fishing in the EU since the early 80s, has made it difficult to maintain their livelihood. The work is tough. This is their 8th day in a row fishing around 9 miles out into this part of the Atlantic. After 4 hours, the nets are reeled in so that they can sort through their catch.
So which fish are you going to have to throw back into the sea?
Any haddock there today will have to be
Can
thrown
you show
back
me
outside.
which one's the haddock?
Well,
Is this one?
This is a haddock here, yeah.
Right. And tell me why you have to throw that back in.
Because we've got a 300 kilo per month quota on this type of fish, and we caught that the first day of the month, so...
So you can't keep it?
No,
throw it back
it'll be illegal to keep it, yeah.
Even though it's dead?
Even though it's dead, it's going back over the side.
What do you think of that?
Well, it's just ludicrous, really, isn't it?
Fishing in the European Union is really complicated because there are so many regulations. Fishermen can't just sail anywhere and catch whatever they want. Each member state has a specific quota for each species, and that quota changes in different parts of EU waters. Some countries can also sail further into foreign territory than others. For example, here in the English Channel, French boats can catch almost 7 times more haddock and 9 times more cod than English ones. British fishermen say that the rules need to change because the policy is largely based on fishing data from the 1970s. But supporters of the system argue that the quota has maintained, and in some cases increased, fish stocks. Roger owns this trawler. He says they welcome conservation efforts, but they also want a fair share.
What do you think will actually happen when the United Kingdom leaves the EU? Do you think there will be a difference?
History would dictate that we'll be sold down a river, because every British government since 1970 has done that. But they've said that, you know, fishing is at the forefront and they'll look after the fishermen. But most fishermen that I know are very wary of that, and we'll have to wait and see.
Since the 1970s, landings of fish in the United Kingdom has more than halved. It's led to a decline in the number of fishermen, dropping from 20,000 to just 12,000 in the past 25 years.
You know, I've been fishing for 30 years. My family are fishermen. My father was a fisherman. I'm the 6th generation fishing, and I think another 10 years in the European Union, that'll be it.
The fish caught by Andy, Roger, and other British fishermen are sold to wholesalers at auctions like this one.
250, yeah, 250, 260.
They include local fisheries and businesses, but nearly half of all UK fish and fish products are exported, and 80% of those exports are to the EU. Before the UK finally leaves the Union, politicians will need to negotiate what will happen to the fishing industry. Robert's business sells fish across the UK, but he also has international clients. He says that leaving the EU is an opportunity to get a better deal.
Isn't there a danger that if the United Kingdom created its own fisheries policy, that any trade it does with the European Union would see tariffs imposed?
But we do face the risk that our fish will be tariffed when it goes into the market. Possibly the greatest risk is that our governments will use fisheries and access to fisheries as a bargaining tool. Fisheries is not a huge GDP contributor, so we are worried in the industry that we might be used once again as a pawn in trade negotiations.
UK vessels landed some 697,000 tonnes of fish in 2015, worth $980 million. But that's still less than 1% of the country's GDP. Fishing communities hope that that figure will grow once they leave the EU.
Intimidation and violence is said to have been used to get the Brits away from French waters. A private meeting is being held in London tomorrow to try and rein in tensions. But the likes of Carl's say a lot of damage. Has already been done.
Through the likes of stuff like this, big heavy steel metal shackles. That's enough to smash a window.
Scallop wars have been brewing in these waters for many years, but in recent days they've reached a climax. Intimidation and violence is said to have been used to get the Brits away from French waters. A private meeting is being held in London tomorrow to try and rein in tensions. But the likes of Carl's say a lot of damage has already been done.
Through the likes of stuff like this, big heavy steel metal shackles. That's enough to smash a window or injure someone, basically.
It was just last week that this footage emerged showing boats colliding in the channel. It's alleged that the French also threw smoke bombs and rocks. Paul was there that night and says it was pretty terrifying.
It just was a mass of boats, up to 40 French boats, surrounded us, started shooting flares, throwing shackles, shouting abuse, surrounded boats, stopped us from fishing. It just sort of like something out of a film. Our British government's going to have to stand up, quit hiding behind politics and Brexit and all this. Straight answers and a bit of common sense has to prevail, I think.
French boats are stopped from fishing off the coast of Normandy at this time of year because their government wants to preserve shellfish numbers. But British boats face no such restriction. You might think that's unfair, but it does happen the other way around as well. In fact, in recent days, French fishermen caught this massive haul of 44 rare bluefin tuna off the coast of Jersey in the Channel Islands, a place where British fishermen aren't allowed. And that too has increased tensions even further.